So the question was, how do I implement the Passion Project Genius Hour in my classroom? There are lots of really great resources on the web. If you Google it, you can definitely find it. So I don't want you to think that my way is the only way, but I will share how I do it, and there are definitely a lot of other people who do it in a different way. Some people actually take 20% of the school year to work on this. I don't. Some people take, they call it Innovation Week, and maybe they focus on that for a week. Some people do it towards the end of the semester as a culminating activity. For me, it is an ongoing project that takes the course of about 3 to 4 months. I introduce the idea right up front to let it percolate and for them to think. Then I share the goal, which is that their project has to be risky, right? It has to be real, has to have impact, skills, knowledge, and reflect their passion. So I get them thinking about that. It's important to kind of guide them into some categories. So that's why I said, champion a cause if you want, develop a product, provide a service, or learn something that you're either really want to learn or you're weak at. So for one of my language learners, I actually had suggested some online resources to help her build her grammar skills. She was mainstreamed into regular classroom, and her skills are definitely not at the same level as a native speaker, and being in a kind of heterogeneous grouping where other students didn't need this lesson, but she did. So, we went online and I gave her some options. Here's some brain pop lessons. Here's some lessons from Flocabulary. Here's some lessons from No Red Ink. Let's develop a plan for you, like the skills that you need building. Let's have you work through these lessons, and I'll provide you with some support. And then in the end, you have to build an ebook explaining these different concepts. So learning a new skill and then teaching it to others. Some students, instead of making an ebook, they might create a video. Other students, for example, last year when Hurricane Harvey hit, they wanted to raise money and donate it to the victims. And we did. We had a fundraising day at school at lunch, and we had students who were championing different causes. Then some wanted to help Alzheimer patients, some wanted to help leukemia patients, and we had tables set up, and they had their posters, and people came by and donated money. So, and then of course I said you had to prove that you follow through, right? So you have to show evidence of your donation and things like that. But all my students have to build a website for whatever it is that they create. So they have to explain what the project is. They have to have photos to document each step of their project, and develop some kind of material, and they have to show impact. So, and I said, impact can be evidenced in many different ways. If you have a YouTube video, then the comments would show the impact of the person interacting with your material. But you don't have to do that. You could interview 5 people and showcase your project, get some response and feedback on that. You can create a survey, collect data. So there's many different ways to show impact, but you have to share out your project because nothing is ever created in a garage and will just become famous overnight, right? So the idea is for my students to really develop something that they're passionate about, and hopefully, lead them towards the path of a career or college is something to think about. I do checkpoints with them throughout the year, but majority of it is an independent homework assignment that they work on over the course of 3 to 4 months. Okay, but I develop checkpoints. We meet one-on-one. They have to show me how they're doing. They keep a timesheet. So that's kind of how I do it. Does that kind of help? Okay.
Actually, I want to offer something up here. At the high school level, for many years now, I've been experimenting with the concept of the Passion Project or 20%. I actually called it from the outset the Common Core project, and you can only imagine how popular that term was. But to go to your question, how do you grade it? It's hard. I mean, let's just be honest, these things are really tough to grade. The other thing is, how do you keep everybody working? And there's so many questions that are posed as a challenge. But the interesting thing, and the flip side of it is, and of course, the other question is, how do you dare give up that much time when there's still so much content that you need to cover? But the flip side is that when you give students an opportunity like this, not always, nothing's perfect, but so many of them end up really sinking their energy into it, that they produce something of real high value. That's kind of an amazing experience. It's something that they can talk about. It's something that can be shared. I mean, if you think about it, the typical kind of work, at least in social studies, my classes, historically, the kind of work they produced, it went up on a wall, and who took a look at it? Some parents at back to school night. And that was about the extent of it. This allows them to go beyond. The other big question about these projects that I want to address here is, what's the role of the teacher when students work on these kind of projects? You've all heard this phrase, we got to get away from the teacher being the sage on the stage, right? And so then the flip side of that is, well, now the teacher becomes the guide on the side. Well, I reject both those notions when it comes to these kinds of projects, because I want something in the middle. I want, and I see myself as a tutor, mentor, coach. In other words, these projects are both teacher and student driven. Because the big problem I find with these kinds of projects is, if you just allow students to pursue their own passion, and you don't take that role of coach, they'll make such great mistakes. And yes, you can say, oh, it's wonderful you made mistakes and you've learned from your mistakes. But in an academic setting, I'm not so sure that's a very real, especially when you have parents saying, why did you let my kid take that project off the deep end? I had a group of kids the other day who wanted to do a history project. And I said, seriously, you know, there's not going to be a teacher or a parent in this school that once you even say the topic, they're going to say, why did you let them choose that topic? So the answer is, you got to do your coaching, in my opinion.
I like how you said you first called it Common Core project. Actually, my students, I give them a link to the Common Core literacy standards for language arts, and they have to choose a standard that matches their project. So it is standards-based. Okay, so just to reiterate for the camera, in your school, it's called Graduate Defense, and you also have, the students do a presentation, and then there are evaluators. Mm-hmm. Yeah, feedback is a tremendously important part of learning, and so that's why I actually meet with them as well. Like, we actually have a conversation. Okay, what is your idea? How are you going to implement it? And then I will suggest, okay, you're missing this component. You know, this is how I want you to gather feedback from other people. This is where you're headed. Here are some resources I want you to look at. Here's a digital tool you can use to create your project. So I'm actively involved in their project making by giving them advice, giving them feedback, pointing them in the right direction, pointing out, like, okay, you're missing this part and this part. So I think what really helps with the Passion Project is that though the topic is open-ended, but I always have this disclaimer. Number one, your parents and guardians have to be okay with it. And number two, you cannot break any school rules or the law, right? And, well, you gotta say that to teenagers, okay. But I also give them a structure. I say, you know, on your website, this is what I want to see. I want to see a page that explains your project. I want to see a page that actually has your product. I want a page of photos that document your journey. I want a page of reflection. And then they always have a bio page, like that about the creators page where they write about themselves, because every website has an About Us page, right? So my students have that.
The question was, in short form, if I understood it right, was how do you create these projects that keep the kids involved. I'm not so sure when I'm a fan of Flipgrid, but I'm not so sure that you can. I mean, a certain percentage of the population has a genuine fear, certifiable fear of public speaking, and another certain percentage of the population has a fear of a camera being put into their face, even if they're not speaking. So Flipgrid is not for every student. And that's the problem with Flipgrid is when should we allow students not to do Flipgrid because they do have this genuine certifiable fear, and when are they just looking for an opportunity to not do the work? So that's a real core issue with Flipgrid, and any time that teachers require students to go before a camera and present. That's just real. So I'm not so sure how to answer that other than to say it's a difficult question. I think that the thing is choice. Give students an opportunity who want to go in front of a camera to go in front of a camera. Give students who want to express their voice, their choice through writing, let them do it that way. Let those who don't want to do either but want to do it through animation, whiteboard, video animation, or whatever the case, let them do it that way, give them that kind of choice. Because what we're really about is not specific kinds of presentation, I don't think anyway, but just about recognizing that we live in a time where we want them to express however they can and why, because it motivates them.
So,
summarize
to summarize, the suggestion is perhaps recruit a few kids who are comfortable with this kind of medium and have them model it and inspire other students. Another idea is if they don't have to appear on the camera, if they can create a screencast instead, demonstrating that, perhaps that might be another avenue to pursue. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's kind of like, oh, I don't feel like it. It's like, well, it doesn't matter if you feel like it. You kind of have to try. They're in that quirky state, a little bit rebellious, so it's kind of challenging.
And I think definitely middle schoolers are self-conscious. They are in that awkward stage where they haven't quite figured out who they are, but they definitely know they're not little kids, right? And sometimes they act really mature one day, and the next day they act like they're a third grader. That's what a middle school is all about. And I think that if we look at the different kind of videos that do exist now in our society, not all of them are live action. Not all of them have to be a live person in front of a camera. There are definitely, like Peter had mentioned, animation type videos out there in which instead of them appearing in the camera, you can have these animation apps kind of do the cartoon explanation online, but they write the script, they're a part of it, or they can even do the voiceover. Or a screencasting situation in which they have developed these slides and they talk over these slides as they are screencasting, so they don't have to necessarily appear. Or maybe Snapchat type of presentation. Right? As long as they're over 13, of course. So one comment was a lot of the students are already using some of those social media apps in their own lives, perhaps integrate that into the classroom. Another idea is Bitmojis, right? Just, you can create your own Bitmojis. Like as long as you take the picture, just the picture of it, you can insert any kind of caption or speech bubbles or along with it. That might be another way for them to express themselves. Like maybe they use an avatar that they create on their own that represents who they are. I know one teacher who uses puppets in the classroom so that the students are not the focus of the camera, but the puppets are.
And to go back to Flipgrid just for a second, when we experimented with this last year, and I'm just trying to recall right now, and there were students who said they didn't want to share. If I'm remembering correctly, sharing publicly, sharing with all the students in the group, and then just sharing with the teacher is something that can be controlled. So if you're feeling like you want to require Flipgrid, maybe you'll have more success just saying, you're only producing that video for me, the teacher. The first thing I ever wrote for the internet probably goes back 6 years. Alice, do you go back before that? Probably, right?
No, that's about right.
About 6 years. And it went up on Edutopia, and I worked on this thing, and I was so proud of this article. I thought, wow. Well, Edutopia wrote me last year and said, Peter, we're going to take down this article. And I was so glad they did, because in a 5-year period of time, 6 people had read it. That's all. So that was an epic fail. Yeah, but I learned a lot from the experience. Yeah, I learned a lot. 6 people in 5 years. You know, I said there are lots of reasons for trying to amplify your voice. You know, I could have gone on there, but one of them is that today, with the ability for so many people to have a voice, we are being described. As educators, as institutions, as education, it's all being described. In other words, the narrative is being created by others. So my opinion is, if we don't speak up and offer up our own voice and or describe the voice of others, someone else is going to do it for us anyway. And I would just think that, again, we have a lot to offer. I don't think people realize just what we do and how much good we do, because we just don't put it forward. And so I think this is a great time for us to do that. If you're going to do it for that reason alone, I think that's a good reason.
So another great resource is Student Cam, right? That's hosted by C-SPAN. Okay, and takes really, every year there's a different topic, and students are to produce a video answering that question. And thank you for sharing that, because now it triggered another something that I remember. Discovery Education has a campaign called Stronger Than Hate. It's a curriculum that they have developed with many different steps on studying what hate is, how if hate has impact in society, and so on. And then there's a student challenge portion in which students produce a video addressing that question, you know, how can we overcome hate? So that's another great resource. So there are definitely some contests, because this one comes with a prize. There are definitely some contests out there that students could engage in, and even if it's not to win, it's the idea of a larger audience and producing a project that other people could benefit from. I know Scholastic has writing contests. I've had students who've gone through and submitted creative writing pieces that way and have won recognition in that manner. So a lot of, I think, educational products, well, maybe not a lot, but a good number of companies out there might be offering these types of opportunities. For example, this one's coming, you know, is every year the Google for Doodle. I forgot the Doodle for Google. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. And one year, one of our 6th graders won for California. He was one of 5 finalists. And the theme really asks students to think about certain ideas. And he, you know, so they don't just draw aimlessly, they draw to a theme. It really requires some analysis and the artistic, inspiration, and then it ends up being this final product. So lots of contests out there that sometimes we don't think about, that perhaps we can share with our students. Even if they never submitted to these companies, that could be a great starting point for us to do just in the classroom or with the community, invite parents in to look at. And then and Peter said he thought of something too.
Yeah, I got one. Two, also, you inspired me. If you are interested and wanting to get your students to speak publicly, how many of you are familiar with StoryCorps? Oh my. Oh my, yeah. Well, it doesn't, you all have to look at StoryCorps then, okay? The app StoryCorps. Students do not have to put their face in front of the camera. They will create a recording. The StoryCorps phone app is designed to have students interview and learn from others. And it has this wonderful feature on it where it helps them create the questions. And so they're StoryCorps, C-O-R-P, StoryCorps, P-S. And the creation of StoryCorps is a wonderful story. If you go on to YouTube and you look up the founding of StoryCorps, how this app was created, under what circumstances and conditions, and then you look at what StoryCorps does every Thanksgiving and what they do with students interviewing family members and learning about their family history, what StoryCorps can be used for in terms of interviewing veterans or servicemen. And the best part of all is every now and then StoryCorps will take one of their interviews, one of their stories, and they will narrate it, like TED Ed, these amazingly gifted animators. And when those come out, they are well worth watching. They are well worth watching. They're beautiful stories. Yes? Story, S-T-O-R-Y, and then C-O-R-P-S. Yeah, David Ursay is the guy who founded that, and an idea that is born in New York and just moved on.
And I think they have around Thanksgiving, they encourage students to interview a family member. And they have curriculum on their website. It guides the students into producing these stories. So you don't have to feel like you have to create something on your own. You know, my children in their school district, they have a science fair. And for my 9th grader, that was one of his final exam projects as well. And they get to choose, you know, whatever they want to study, and then go through the scientific method, document their journey, keep a science journal, you know, create graphs and spreadsheets, write-ups. I mean, this is cross-curricular. When my daughter worked on her science fair as a 6th grader, she decided she wanted to see how students were using water bottles. So she created a Google Form survey, and the question was, do you use disposable plastic bottles or do you use reusable bottles? And so she shared that survey with her school. Luckily as a teacher, I said to my school, could you pass out the survey with your class? And then I reached out to my different networks. I posted on social media. In the end, she collected 1,700 responses. That's real authentic learning. That's real data that she learned how to graph out and create pie charts and come to an understanding. And they were asked like what age group they were. Her hypothesis was that the older students would use reusable water bottles more than the younger students, and actually that didn't turn out to be the case. I forgot exactly which age group, but she did ask that. And so there were some interesting ideas. It was like, you know, I thought, and that was an authentic question, like how many people are using reusable water bottles? Is there a trend towards using that?